These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Unconventional Times. If you are familiar with this program and you're looking at this screen right now or listening wherever you get this particular podcast, you will recognize that I am not your usual host, Richard Gordon. My name is Lou Diamond, and we are continuing our conversation on immigration as this episode comes out on the 4th of July, celebrating our 250th birthday of the United States of America. And why I am here is because today's special guest is someone who would like to chat with you mostly, and you're mostly familiar with, but let's make it clear, it would be very difficult for him to just ask himself these questions. So without further ado, I bring you your usual host of this program, Mr. Richard Gordon. Richard, welcome to your own program.
Well, thank you, Lou. It's a little unusual to be a guest on my own show, but I appreciate it. We should tell people that Lou Diamond runs Thrive Loud, and he happens to be the producer of this program and a lot of other programs. So if you're listening to this, Thrive Loud, Lou Diamond, guy to call.
This is always good to get a plug within your own show here. But well,
There
thank
you
you for
go.
that. But this is an interesting conversation, and if you've been checking out the different conversations in this episode, immigration is something that is not only topical here within our country, within the political landscape, but has been over the last 250 years an integral component to the growth of the United States. So let's get a little personal here.
Sure.
Richard, so the listeners can better understand it, where were you born?
Well, I was born in the United States. I was born in the Bronx. Some people might not consider that the United States, but yeah, I was born in the Bronx, lived there till I was three, when I moved to New Jersey.
Now, where did your family come from originally?
So, three of my four grandparents were born in Eastern Europe. Interestingly, for some of my age, one of them was not. One of them was born in Boston, but her mother was also born in Eastern Europe. So, one in Poland by the Russian border, one in Albania, one in Ukraine, which is interesting. We could talk about. I didn't realize that till very recently.
Mm.
And I'm not, and then one in Boston. So those are the four.
And when did those who were not born in the country emigrate to the United States?
Um, in the 1910s, largely. It's easiest for me to talk about my maternal grandfather because I knew him the best. But he came over in the prior to World War One, and the reason I know that is because he volunteered and served in World War One.
Oh, wow. So your grandfather served in the First World War, and when they emigrated into the United States, as I know it, they came to the Lower East Side. Is that where they all ended
Yeah,
up?
they all came through Ellis Island. Again, I'll talk about my maternal grandfather because
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting story. He and his brother, Joe, and the father, my great grandfather, got on a boat and sailed here, came to Ellis Island, were cleared, ended up on the Lower East Side of New York City. And then my great grandfather, 3 days later, left, went back, went back to Europe, left his two children here. My grandfather was about 14 at the time, um, and his brother was, I think, 2 years older, and he left the two kids here and went back to Europe to be with the rest of the family. And the rest of the family never made it and
Oh,
never
wow.
got here, which is another whole story. But yeah, my grandfather and his brother were here all alone, like a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old.
Mm.
And you just think about what that means and how unbelievably difficult that must have been.
And while their story is unique, it is not unique in the sense that that was a very common thing where people were trying to bring back other members of their family and set up camp and help to do that, not only here in the United States, but in many other cities away from Eastern Europe due to what was going on from World War One and obviously World War Two more prevalently. So growing up in the Lower East Side, that is a common story for many
That it is.
Jewish immigrants here in the United States. Uh, do you have a lot of information from your maternal grandfather as to what that was like?
Not a heck of a lot. They, of course, eventually moved on up to the Bronx, as as people of that time would want to do. But like many people of that time, three of my grandparents worked in the garment industry, in sweatshops making clothes. My paternal grandmother was a seamstress and made dresses for people and those type of things. I believe my paternal grandfather was a furrier. Uh, Working in the fur industry. Something, of course, we would never do today. But and then they all moved up to the Bronx at some point.
Were a lot of the cultures and customs things that your mother was brought up with and was very close, like the old joke, back in the old country, an expression that was used a lot. Was that the ways, their methods, and things like that, the way that she was brought up? Was that very much ingrained in the way that she was?
I think the thing that really was formative for my mother, uh, even more than that, was the Depression and the economic depression. Um, and the stories I grew up with were just how impossible it was to afford anything, and how difficult it was to go buy a sandwich, and how sometimes my grandmother would make dinner for her and she wouldn't want to eat it, and she'd cry and whatnot, and then my grandfather had to find the 5 cents to go get her a sandwich, and how difficult that was. So, what I think I heard more of was the economic part of it. But I'll tell you one thing that I found very interesting, because this is something that doesn't get passed on, and I think about this a lot with what's going on today, is growing up hearing a foreign language frequently, and growing up hearing people talking a language that you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, but they're communicating. And growing up with grandparents who had very heavy accents, which, except for my maternal grandmother, who obviously was born in Boston, she had her own accent, but that's a different story. Actually, she didn't have a Boston accent, uh, but how interesting it was to hear people with a foreign accent. I just think that that was perfectly normal. And I think today for me, listening to people who have different accents, well, that's perfectly normal. That's sort of the way I grew up.
Specifically around the 1930s, and I believe this was also true, obviously, in the early aughts or the tens, right, when during that particular decade and coming to America, there was this promise of America: freedom, uh, freedom of religion, freedom of doing the things you wanted to do, this dream that was obviously very prevalent. How important was that promise of America to you and your family?
Well, I think it's huge. I think one of the interesting things about the promise of America is it's not a promise to you. It's a promise to your children, your grandchildren. And I'm always fascinated by that because, there's this image of people who live overseas that the United States is paved with gold and whatnot. It's not. And people who come here today included, you come for freedom. You come to get away from something economically, oppression, politically, or religiously, or racially, and you come to America with a hope and a dream. But the hope and the dream is largely that your children will have a better life than you. And one of the things that I am very aware of and think about frequently is how my grandparents worked so hard, really, really hard, at manual labor. Except I should say my maternal grandmother, what a great job she had. She used to stuff the jelly into jelly donuts.
Oh
Now,
my goodness.
I think I think that's a great job. I happen to love jelly donuts. I don't know if there's a connection there, but these people came here to escape something, to escape being killed, or their
Yeah.
towns being destroyed, etc. And came here, but they really didn't come here to better themselves. They came here to better their children. And it amazes me to think that, I mean, just think about this for a minute. My father went to college. You
Wow.
know, my dad went to college, and how shocking that is in one generation to go from living in a tiny little town in Eastern Europe where you're afraid of what's going to happen tomorrow to your child going to a major American university in New York and graduating. And it's sort of an amazing tale, and I think it tells a lot about this country. So to me, it's not the promise of America for yourself. It wasn't for my grandparents. It was that their children and their grandchildren could live the life they wanted them to live.
I love that you talk about education. It historically not only, bettering your next generation's life and livelihood, and education was a path to go about doing that. Uh, and obviously, that has been something that has been very prevalent for yourself because you not only went on to college, but you also became an attorney. So through law school. So the importance of that education, does it still ring within your DNA as a priority in your life, um, from the path that they've wanted to make it better for you? Has that always stood out as something that you look at and say, when you were wanting to make a decision to go into law or eventually to have your own children make those decisions, has that been one of the passed down values that has been, inspirited within you?
Well, I think inherent in the American promise is that every child gets a good education. And we need to remember that. And we can't forget that. And we need to continue that. And that is a promise, that is a contract, if you will, that we have with all of America's children. And it's something that we should never forget. On a personal level, um, you could judge this as you wish. My sister has a PhD, my brother's a doctor, and I'm a lawyer. So it wasn't really much of a choice. It was much more of which grad school, which type of grad school will you be attending? And since my brother was already the doctor, I thought law made a lot of sense. But I think it is a value. And it's going to be interesting how this plays out over the next two generations, let's say, as higher education changes and online and how you learn changes. And it's interesting to me that in some ways we're going to a backwards, and I don't say backwards in a negative way, but to a different model where college may not be the most important thing,
Yeah.
where, getting a trade and learning something that a valuable skill, is equally as important. So it's not to me that it has to be higher ed. But yes, it was drilled into me probably from the moment I could think that I would be going to grad school. You
Let's
can't
take
disappoint mom.
You can't make you can yeah, you got to make sure that you're putting your mind to good use. Uh, but this is actually interesting into what this platform is about and the importance and priority of politics in your life. Is there a connection to the courage and sacrifice that your grandparents made and your desire to stay connected, stay involved, and be a player in helping the growth of this country from a legal and political standpoint?
Yeah, I think there is a huge connection, actually. I would never put myself in their category as far as courage and strength that they have. I find it amazing what they did. I mean, absolutely amazing when I think about it. And I would never put myself in that category. But it never fails to cross my mind, especially, Lou, you know what I do. And, I do spend a lot of time with elected officials. And I've been very fortunate in my life to have gotten to know people at the highest levels and, governors and senators and congressmen, presidents. Um, and it's rare that I'm in a room like that I don't stop and think of my grandparents. And I
Yeah.
don't stop and think about how stunning this would be to them that their grandchild is not only in the room with them, but is asked questions and advice. And what do you think I should do? And I think that would be so completely out of their realm. My mother, my mother. It's interesting when I would tell her, "Oh, I met so and so." Her comment was always the same. does he or she, do they know your name? Because to my mother, if they know your name, they know you. And that was always important to her. It's interesting. But I know for a fact that I would not be doing what I am doing. Not just the show, but my whole career, my whole life, my whole desire. I mean, I knew when I was 14 that I was going to go to law school and that I was going to go into politics. I mean, I knew at a very, very young age that this is what I was going to do, and I've done it. Um, but in my mind, in my way of thinking, in a lot of ways, it is a payback. It is a thank you to the country for what, in my own little personal way. I don't have a big enough ego to think that my contribution has been that monumental, but in my own small little way, it's my thank you for what they did for my grandparents. That they took these people who I don't know what they could bring to this country except themselves.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need more tailors and seamstresses back in the day. It's not like they were engineers and doctors. They were very simple people. But this country took them in, and this
Mhm.
country allowed them to develop a life and have a family and feel safe and pray the way they wanted to and vote and become citizens. And all my whole family obviously did. Um, and to me, that is something that one needs to say thank you for. And it is an amazing gift that I have been given, that my family has been given, that millions of families have been given. I mean, I'm so not unusual. But to me, and I'm sitting here, it's funny, I'm looking at the pictures on the wall of me with presidents and congressmen and vice president and whatnot. And I've been very lucky to have been able to live this life, but I'm very aware that it is on their shoulders, and it's thanks to my grandparents, and it's thanks to a country that let people come in and live this life without judgment and let their families grow and develop. So, yeah, I think my entire political career, I mean, I'll tell you the second piece of it, the entire political career uh, was because of that, was my little way of saying thank you for what you did for my family. The second piece of it is, I grew up in a time that was tumultuous, and my sister, who I adore, is a few years older than me and was very involved in the political activities of the time, and I greatly admired her. And so I wanted to, I paid a lot of attention at a very young age about what was going on in the country. And I realized when I was very young that no one cares how old you are. They care about how hard you work and what you can bring to the table. And at a very young age, I started working in politics and got to do amazing things. And I attribute a lot of that to my sister. So the reason I started this whole thing was clearly because of my grandparents and their contributions to my life. And, when you sit and you talk to someone about their life and what it was like and why they came here. And I used to have those conversations with my grandparents. It's really interesting. You learn so much. I mentioned before uh, about my grandmother. I remember sitting with her. My grandmother had a pretty heavy accent. I remember sitting with her at her kitchen table. They eventually moved to Hurleyville, New York, upstate in
Yep.
the Catskills.
Know it well.
There you go, where she took in clothes and uh, did made outfits for people. I remember sitting with her, and she putting a box together of clothes and stuff, and she was shipping it to Russia, to ship it to her family back in Russia. And she would always tell me about it and being Russian and whatever. And I remember sitting with her years later and asking her, did she still do it? And she said no. She was told not to. Her family sent her a note and said, please don't do this anymore. It makes our lives more difficult.
Mm.
And talk about a lesson on the Cold War.
Yep.
Talk about a lesson. I mean, what else do you need to know about the Soviet Union? You could read the books, you could read the newspapers. I just had to talk to my grandmother, and I learned more in those 2 minutes about it than I probably would have learned in any other way. And it just was an interesting thing. And then many years later, frankly, about a year ago, maybe two, I found out that she wasn't Russian, that she was Ukrainian.
Mm.
And I understand why she said she was Russian because in my mind, there was no Ukraine at the time. It was
Right.
the Soviet Union. So I found that very interesting.
I want to do this comparison. We've had conversations in this very episode of people who are first generation
Hmm.
immigrants or Americans, and you're coming from now three generations for yourself, for your grandparents born elsewhere, your parents, now you. Um, then and now and tomorrow. Let's talk about immigration itself. Obviously, different situations that we're dealing with and people who have grown up over the last 30 years that came in maybe from there versus those that came back almost 100 years ago. Um, and what's going on today? You obviously have a take on this, but I think uh, is it the same for what life is for immigrants? Is it going to be different? Those are my two main questions I'd love to get your take on, Richard.
Yeah, I think it's very different today. I'll talk about immigration from a personal level. It's extraordinarily difficult for me to be critical of people who want to come to this country and sacrifice so much to come to this country. The same reason my grandparents did. And their skin may be a little darker, their language may be a little different. They may be a little different than my family, but really not that different. And they came to this country for a reason, which was almost the exact same reason as my grandparents came. I think the real difference is back in the day, when my grandparents came, we had a very different immigration system. I mean, we had quotas based on national origin, based on religion, based on all types of things. And we let certain people in, we didn't let certain people, uh, we kept certain people out. If you weren't healthy, you were sent home. But we had a very different system. And, you could bifurcate this discussion. And if you want to do a direct comparison, the direct comparison would be people who are coming here legally, right? And how that matches up to my grandparents. And to me, there is no argument about that. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, I applaud that. I welcome that. This country opened its arms, to my grandparents. I opened my arms to them because they are me, right? There's no difference. As I said, they're just maybe a little darker, maybe a language I don't understand. And maybe I understand a little bit better about why, there are people in America who didn't want the Irish in and didn't want the Jews in and didn't want, whatever in, because that was scary to them. But, we have an obligation, and that's what this country is about. I mean, the tired and the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free. I mean, that's who we are, and that's who we should be. And we're losing the discussion here. We're losing the point. We're so much hell-bent on shipping people out of the country, that we're losing the point about what immigration did for this country and who these people are and why they're coming here. And we need a system for today and tomorrow and the future that makes sense. And we need a system that allows for legal immigration. And yeah, I think very few people would argue that we shouldn't have secure borders. I mean, my family wasn't allowed to just show up and be in New York. They had to go through a process and whatnot. I worry about immigration long term on a completely different reason. I think there's going to be, this could take us way off field, but I think there's something else that's going to start happening, and that's environmental
Mm,
migration.
mm.
And as we sit here today, Lou, it's 100 degrees in New York. We're expecting 3 or 4 days of this. It hasn't been this hot in quite some time. Um, the days are getting hotter and hotter, and in a lot of places in Central and South America, it's getting very, very hot. And people are going to leave not just because of the crime, not just because of economics, not just because of oppression, but they're going to try to get someplace that they can actually live. And countries like the United States, we need to start talking about that and start thinking about that and how we're going to deal with it. And so, you asked me a question about today and tomorrow. I think politicians need to come to grips with the reality. People are going to keep coming to this country we should applaud that. They're coming to this country because this is the place for their children and their grandchildren. This is an opportunity for them that they couldn't find back home. And we need to celebrate that because it's important. But the way to do it is to have a system that works. And it's funny, I've been in politics my entire life. I mean, since I'm 14, it's been a couple years. Um, Enough rhetoric, enough, look how tough I am. I get to ship 14-year-old children back to Libya, a place they've never lived before in their lives. I get to deport people because they had a traffic accident once, or children of parents who have been here for 30 years, and have grown up here. And we get to ship them somewhere they've never lived. That's not who we are. And that's not what this is about. And we're wasting time and we're focusing on the wrong thing. And yes, there are people who broke the law and did horrible things. They should be deported tomorrow. I'm all for it. But children who've spent their lives here, who've grown up
Yeah.
here, have done the right thing, parents who have worked hard, I get it. They broke the law at one time. But 30, 40 years ago, that's a long time. And we need to move on. But we need to move on with a Congress that has the courage and the strength and the political will to say, okay, this is the deal we're going to cut. Look, I could easily say, anyone here before January 20th, 2017? Why that date? That was the date Donald Trump was inaugurated the first time. Anyone here before then, you can stay. I can easily see drawing a line. I'm just pick that date. Pick a date. Draw a line. Let people stay. I think that's what George W. Bush wanted to do at one time. Let's just pick a date. Let's let people stay. Let's have a system that works, that lets people come into this country who have something to offer and want to escape something and look at America as the land of opportunity. That's who America is. As we celebrate our 250th anniversary, that's what we should be celebrating. It's not just the founding fathers, Lou, it's your grandparents.
Yeah.
That's who we should be celebrating. They made this country. They made it possible for you and your family, my family, everyone who's listening to this, unless they happen to be Native American, everyone who's listening to this, this country gave them a break. Well, that's who we are. And that's what we should be doing for the next generation.
As we are releasing this episode right at America's birthday, I think it's also fitting that it coincides right now with FIFA's World Cup taking place here in the country. And if you haven't had a chance to go check it out, listeners and viewers, it's the only thing on right now. So I can't
Yeah.
believe that that's the case. There's been this incredible sentiment from those traveling abroad and those who support the countries that they came from. And the fandom is just absolutely spectacular. But there's been this other takeaway that there has been a general kindness that people have been loving when they've been visiting the different cities in Texas and Atlanta and San Francisco and Seattle and Miami, wherever it might be, that there is a welcomingness that people were like, well, maybe the United States isn't so bad. Our PR issue might be getting a little bit of a fix here. But it's also wonderful to see the embracing of the cultures that people have come from. Specifically, that seems to be the most prevalent in the Latin American countries, where there's obviously such a large component of the population. And it's something for us to cherish, that we have a pride in our own country in the USA, but there's also this embracement of where we came from, which is, I think, something that has always made America strong. And hopefully that continues. And I agree with your common sense theory. There were certain things that needed to be booted out, and there were certain things that need to be maintained. It's getting
But
everybody on the same page is hard.
it's interesting when you talk about the World Cup, and we're not going to get into the ticket prices and how
No,
crazy
we
that
are
is.
not.
Oh my God. Um, Americans are very welcoming. And I think they're excited to see these people here. And I think we're all having a great time watching, people from Scotland
Oh,
just having a
incredible.
ball and how we're all seeing it. But just take a moment and think about that for a second. We're embracing of people we know are leaving. We're embracing of people. We've been sold this bill of goods that people from foreign countries who immigrate here are doing it to take our jobs, right? That if we let them in, they're going to take our jobs, and our lives are not going to be as great because they're here. Well, guess what? We got that backwards. And the truth of the matter is, they're not going to take our jobs because the jobs that most first generation, most immigrants take, even before first generation, um, are not the jobs that Americans want anymore and that are willing to take. And so this whole notion that they're here to take from us is not true. And every economic model that's ever looked at this shows that immigration is a net plus economically. And we should understand that, and the public needs to understand that. And we need to get off our xenophobia. And yeah, I mean, inherently, we're good folks. We're good people. We're welcoming these people, and we want them to be in our, have a blast, have a great time. But at the same time, I think a lot of people are saying, and then goodbye, on July 19th when the game's over, so long, because they're not a threat. And we need to understand that these other people, now, Lou, there's plenty of bad people. Okay, there are gangs, there are drug dealers, there's all types of people of all races and all whatevers. They don't belong here. Okay, that's clear. But we're welcoming of people generally. If we could only understand that they're adding to the like my former boss used to call it the collage of America. They're adding to this mosaic of America, he used to call it. And each has a little piece. And it's interesting because I have always looked at different people, whether they're Greek or Brazilian or French, or they add something. It's a different culture. It's interesting. It's fascinating. I want to learn about you, right? You're not taking away from me. You're adding to me. I'm learning about your food. I'm learning about your culture. I'm learning about how you grew up. I'm learning about your politics. It's fascinating. And that's what we should be embracing on the 250th anniversary. We should be embracing that feeling that you're talking about, this feeling of, come on in. We want to learn from you. If you're bad, we're going to kick you the heck out. But we could be embracing of people who are different than us. And that's what this country has always done. That's why I'm here. I'd be living someplace, if I were alive, I'd be living someplace in Eastern Europe. God only knows doing what. So I think the country and the people of the United States deserve a lot of credit. We've had a lot of ups and downs over a long time. Immigration has been a massive issue in this country, way back, way into the 1800s. This is not particularly new. Um, but we need to come to terms with it. And we need to let that better part of us, the part, Lou, that you're talking about, the embrace, we need to let that come through, not just for 3 weeks around a soccer/football tournament. We need to let that come through every day. And that'll make the United States even stronger.
And to put a bow on the episode here, Richard, if you had one word as it relates to immigration in the US and the challenges that everyone is facing going forward, is there one word that maybe you have for the hope of what immigration could or should be going forward?
First, the first word that comes to my mind, excuse me, is kindness. And kindness for people who are dealing with something that my family has escaped and my family has gotten past. But I need to show kindness and understanding would be my other word for what they're going through. And I cannot imagine what it is for a mother living someplace in South America and worrying every day whether her children are going to be kidnapped and forced to be in gangs. I can't imagine that. And if I had to walk 1,000 miles to get my children to safety, I would do it. I would do it. She doesn't deserve to be condemned. She deserves to be lifted up and admired because that to me is amazing. And my country should take her in and embrace her. So, yeah, if I was going to use a word, I think my word would be kindness. And my second word would be remember. Remember where you came from. Remember where your grandparents went through or your great grandparents. Remember what this country did for you. And when you remember that, show kindness to the people who are just trying to create a better life for their children, the way your family tried to create a better life for you.
To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on Unconventional Times with Richard Gordon. Richard Gordon, thank you for opining in this particular component of the episode. Happy birthday, America. 250 years. Here's to 250 more. And with that, remember, listeners, friends, and everyone out there, stay unconventional.
Thank you, Lou.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.